The Rudd government introduced NAPLAN in 2008. It starts in Year 3 and students are tested every 2 years.
It's going to give us a piece of information we haven't had before. It's going to give parents information they've never had before.
NAPLAN's promise was that the data it collected would help lift school standards, but it seems that promise has stalled. NAPLAN measures progress across 5 key areas. The latest figures show more students in Years 3 and 5 are meeting minimum standards than they were a decade ago across every subject. But in high school, Year 7s are losing ground in numeracy and writing. Year 9s are slipping in reading and grammar. But the worst results are for writing, particularly in Queensland and the Northern Territory. Given the slight improvements in some areas and the backsliding in others, criticisms of NAPLAN are growing louder. Minister, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Lee.
Federal government spending on education has increased by $20 billion during the past decade, with little improvement in results if you look at the NAPLAN outcomes. Why?
Well, I think it's important for us to understand that it's not just about money. Obviously, money is important, but with that also has to come reform. And that's why, with the reviews done by David Gonski, we've also asked state and territory governments to also reform the system. And one of the key things that we're looking to achieve, and all states and territories have signed up to this, is to make sure that for 12 months of learning, there is also 12 months of progression. And as we roll this out, my hope is that we will start to see an uplift in the NAPLAN results.
But you say as we roll this out, you've been in government for 6 years now.
That's right, and it takes a while to get all the states and territories on board. As you would remember, we got every state and territory signed up to the school reform agenda before the last election, apart from Victoria. We got Victoria signed up immediately afterwards, and so now all of us are working towards making sure that those reforms which were proposed by David Gonski will be implemented. I've already met with all my state and territory colleagues this year after the election. I'll be meeting with them again next month, and then we'll be meeting again in December. So work is now apace to make sure we drive this agenda.
The 3 biggest states, Victoria, Queensland and New South Wales, are all reviewing NAPLAN. Is it a matter of time until it's overhauled or dumped?
So at the moment, what we're doing is we're transitioning NAPLAN from pen and paper to online. Now, we've got about 50% of that transition in place. We want to work together over the next year to make sure that we get everyone online. It might take us 2 years, but our hope is that we can get that done. I think then, once we've got NAPLAN fully online, it will be time to have a look at NAPLAN and say, OK, how can we make it fit for purpose for the next 5 to 10 years? But while we're transitioning to online, I don't think it's the right time to do it.
On that point about online, the last round of tests were marred by computer glitches. Are you confident in what the test results are actually showing? And do they match your sense of what you see anecdotally when you go on school visits?
Yes, all the advice that I'm getting is that the results are comparable, and that's come from the experts, and that's been presented to Education Council. And look, it does match what I see as I go around and visit schools. And the feedback that I'm getting, especially when it comes from parents, is that they like NAPLAN, they like getting the results because they get a sense as to where their child's at with their education.
But people were told, swallow your concerns about, say, pressure on children and things like that, because NAPLAN will help lead to significant improvements in student outcomes. If it hasn't done that so far, then why keep going with it?
Well, we've got to remember, Lee, that the reason we know that we're getting a mixed performance when it comes to NAPLAN is because students are undertaking it. If they weren't, we would have no idea. So it's absolutely vital that we have a measurement tool. Now, we're transitioning that measurement tool from pen and paper to online. We're halfway through that process. So let's focus on getting that right. And then at the end of that, let's reassess and see, okay, where do we want to go from here? But it's incredibly important that we have a measurement tool, because without it, we would have no idea how our children are performing.
Let me ask you about a few other issues in education. In a speech to the Press Club today, you noted that Australian universities are developing guidelines to address cybersecurity and foreign interference. Are foreign students in Australian universities subject to security screening if they're studying or researching in sensitive fields?
So what we're seeking to do with the university sector is work with them to put in place best practice guidelines so that we can deal with the threat of foreign interference. Now, we're doing this in 4 key areas. There's been very close collaboration and cooperation between the university sector and government agencies.
But on that point I raised,
put these guidelines in place.
So that,
yes,
does that mean at the moment that students who come from overseas studying in foreign areas or researching in that aren't screened?
What we have is we have normal procedures which our immigration system has in place for people who either come here on tourist visas, for people who come here on working visas, people who are here as permanent residents. So we have a system in place that deals with this. What we're doing now is we're making sure that that relationship between our government agencies and the university sector has a framework around it, and that we have closer collaboration and cooperation between the sector and government agencies. And I commend the university sector of the way they have cooperatively worked to establish this framework, and now we're looking to put the meat on the bone and have something to present to the Australian people by November.
There's been a 6-fold increase in the number of Chinese students studying in Australia in the past 2 decades. The Chancellor of the University of Queensland, Peter Varghese, raised this question this week of what proportion of the student population can be international before you fundamentally change the character of a university. Is it a third, half, 3/4? What do you think is the answer to that?
Well, can I say I'm very pleased that Peter Varghese, as a Chancellor, is raising this question, and it's something that every university, and remembering that every university is autonomous, something that their councils should be asking. These are questions they should be asking. As the Minister, I'm
asking you, what do you think? A quarter, half?
Well, Lee, it varies. So one of the things as Minister that I'm trying to do is get more international students into regional and rural areas, because there is a big economic benefit that it brings to universities from us having international students.
Minister, thanks for speaking to us.
Pleasure, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.